and we would line up before the game and pick all the pickle pears out and throw them out to one side. And but we didn't have room to play ball anyplace back in the school. But,
so when the opposing team came to play y'all, had you picked the pickle pears out for them too, or just for your? Okay.
No, we did the whole field.
Yeah.
The whole field. Yeah.
What? Go ahead.
There were a lot of sand spurs too.
Yeah.
I've heard stories of opposing teams that came to play Cedar Key, and the field was full of sand spurs, and it was very tough for them to play.
Yeah, because some of the Cedar Key boys went barefoot. And had real tough soles. So the sand spurs didn't bother them, but it did the opposing team.
So you were the youngest of a large family, and you had other family members in Cedar Key. So you had cousins here, but you had a lot of friends here too.
Yes,
you
I
grew
do.
up.
Yes, I do.
And have you maintained relationships with those people that you grew up with? And
Well, I did for a long time, but I gave up my car, and because of my eyes, and I kind of been staying at home. But if they have any special occasions, my daughter will bring me if I want to come.
well, what was it like growing up in Cedar Key when you were growing up? Because to me, it sounds like the perfect place to grow up.
Well, I don't know, people would come in and say, well, it's just too dead here. What do you like about it? I says, well, maybe that's what I like. So, but one time there was a car came in, and he rode up and down the streets, and he stopped me, and he says, how do we get back out of here? I says, just like you came in. So he didn't like that much. But there's only one way in and one way out. Now, when they have a storm, most people leave if they think it's going to be really bad. But they go up to Chiefland or Bronson. We always went to Gainesville because we had some friends there. But the water would cover the road, and two of my brothers at that time, the water was over the road, and you couldn't see it where the bridge was. And they walked in front of the, say it was a bread truck, they walked in front of the truck to tell the driver where the road was, and they got in and out that way. But it was kind of miserable for a while.
Was your family's home ever flooded in a storm?
No. The water came up in the backyard, and but it never got up into the house because it was built up a little bit high. But there was a boat that washed up in the backyard, and there was a fish house that washed up in the backyard. But as far as we always had to clean up, it left a mess after it came, and we'd always clean up after that. But one time we had a storm, and we had some food that was on a table, and the table was right below a window, and the wind blew the bottom half of that window in on top of the table, and it took the top half of it out in the yard. So all the food we had on the table was ruined, but we had to put a piece of plywood up to cover that. But it's a funny thing, it had wooden shingles on it, on the house, and you could see daylight out through it, but you know it never leaked. That's amazing.
It is, truly.
And those old wooden shingles were still there until we got ready to replace put tin roof on it now.
Well, now, do you remember the train?
Well, about the only thing I did was watch it. I was kind of young at that time, but I'd go down to the depot there and watch it. And it would come back and go down to the cabbage plant. But I just loved to watch it. And it was just something to see.
Did you ever ride it to Gainesville?
No.
You never did.
No.
Now, when the train went out onto what is now Dock Street, do you remember what was out there on the dock, on the big dock?
Well, there was fish houses.
Did your daddy have a fish house out there?
No. He sold fish to the fish houses. Then they packed it in barrels and put it on the boxcars. They had, at that time, they were selling a lot of turtles. And they would sell them, and they had a rack that they turned them over on their back and laid them on that rack and shipped them out of Cedar Keys that way to wherever they wanted to go. So,
do you know where most of those turtles went?
I've caught some of them, but at that time, we just caught them and ate what we wanted.
Right.
But as far as shipping any, we didn't. Now they had a turtle they called diamondback turtle. They was only about maybe 9 or 10 inches long, and they never got to be very big. But they would catch these turtles and put them in what they call a crawl. That's where they're free to crawl. And we would catch fiddlers by the 5-gallon lots and dump them in that crawl. We may got 25 or 30 cents for the 5 gallon, but we would feed them, and then they would gradually get them turtles and send them off. They had a good market for them up in New York, I guess. But the crabbing business, it didn't start till after that, I guess, after I left. But
Was mullet fishing the main fish that was caught here?
Mullet fishing was it.
That was.
That was it. So,
Is that your favorite fish to eat?
yeah. Well, my mother liked pompano, but pompano was too expensive to eat, so she always sold them. But,
do you remember some of the fish houses that were out on the dock and what
well,
some of the other?
The one I remember was W.R. Hodges. He's the one that we sold the fish to. And then Mr. Johnson had a fish house out there, and there was a gas house out there where you could buy gas. There was a sponge dock out there for the Greeks to come in, and they would unload their sponge, and they would hire somebody from Cedar Keys to drive them back down to Tarpon Springs. Yeah, this is one of the oldies.
Do you remember it looking like that?
Yeah, yeah.
Did you ever want to ride the train?
I never had any indications to. I never wanted to. Yeah. That's. I suppose you've seen these.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. It's a great picture showing what it was. Mm-hmm. How many were in your graduating class at Cedar Key? And
There
what?
were 9.
9.
9 people. Yes. There was, I believe, three boys, 4 boys, and the rest of them was girls. But they're all dead except in me and one boy. He's still living, Vernon Castell.
Oh,
So,
yes. That was... Do you remember any of your teachers, your school teachers?
well, I remember one in the 6th grade. Her name was Grace Bishop, and she married a man by the name of Takahashi. I assume he was Japanese, but I remember the story that she made us memorize. But that was in the 6th grade. But then I got on up into the 11th and 12th, and I remember the first year we went to so that we could change classes, and all the people that was above us, they made fun of us, like maybe the 10th grade. But after 11th and 12th, we began to realize we changed classes, and that was something different for us. Mm-hmm. But most of the high school teachers, they just usually came and taught 1 year, and that was it. They either didn't like it or something's wrong somewhere. Mm-hmm. So, but.
Do you feel like the education you got here was a good education?
Yes, I do. Since my daughter married Chris Beckham, he was a teacher, and he would mention things that I had no idea what he was talking about. He was a kind of a math teacher, and I really didn't get too much math. But a lot of the things that he mentions now is stuff that I don't know anything about. Mm-hmm. So I don't feel like I missed a whole lot. Mm-hmm. I don't really need all this stuff that they got now for these kids. Mm-hmm. These kids are 10, 12 years old. They learn more than I ever could. Mm-hmm. So it just, either I didn't want it or couldn't get it or something, but I never got it. So.
When you went into the Second World War and it was over and you came home to visit your parents, did you decide not to stay? I know you had to go up to Detroit to get out of the service, but what made you decide not to come back to Cedar Key?
Well, if I would come back to Cedar Keys to stay, I would have been a fisherman. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no future in fishing. So my brother was with the telephone company in Tampa, and I went to visit him, and the manager from Orlando was there. And he says, "Do you want to come work with us?" I said, "Yeah." So I signed up with the telephone company in Orlando, and I reported to there on a Monday. And I spent 40 years with the telephone company. So, but I had a wife and 4 children. The children are all still living. My wife's dead. So,
that was a good career.
I think so.
It was a very good career for you.
Now, when I was working with the telephone company, if they had a storm or an ice break, I was picked to go. I think I was picked to go because they knew I would be straight. I didn't drink, and I think they took that into consideration. So, but some of the boys that came, they raised heck.
So after hurricanes in different places, they would send, you would be on the team that would go and try to.
One place they sent me to was Tupelo, Mississippi. That was an ice storm, and the trees would just break the wires, and it was all just laying on the ground. So it was our job to get everything back up.
How long did that take?
Well, usually maybe 4 weeks we'd have it cleaned up. But if they had a real bad storm where there was a lot of wires down, they would send the power company out first to pick up the wires that was dangerous. And then they would tell us what areas was clear, and then we would go work that part as the telephone. I also went down to Fort Lauderdale and worked on a storm there. But I enjoyed it, but it was good pay.
Well, getting back to Cedar Key, you made nets for people just up until recently. So even though you did not come back to Cedar Key to earn your living as fishing, fishing was still an important part to you, for you to be making nets so other people could fish. And you must enjoy fishing yourself.
Well,
but not as a living.
I did, and making nets would give me something to do. In other words, I was there, the yard work was done, I would sit inside and I would make nets. Now, to make a net, you start off what they call a mesh block. That's something about whatever size you wanted to make the mesh. And then you had some twine that you wanted to use, and you made the nets out of that. Then the leads were molded, and you got a hold of those. And making one was not really, it was just time consuming. But the way they do it now, you buy a whole bunch of webbing and sew it together. Then you have a net. You can make it just as big as you want it or just as small. And but it's a lot of people that even fish, they don't know how to mend a net. I would get a net in and they'd have it sewed up with tie wraps. You know, a tie wrap is just something you put it in, but I would cut the tie wraps off and then mend the holes like it was supposed to be. But I had people tell me, would you show me how to make a net, how to mend a hole? I says, I'm here all the time, just come on up. But they never took the time to learn. So.
Did you teach any of your children how to do that? Do they know how?
They really wasn't interested.
It's a lost art.
Yes.
Now the one boy, he's a diver, and he still is a diver, and he goes all over the world. And then the other boy they just not interested in it.
Well, when you were growing up here as a child, what did you do for fun? What did you and your friends do?
Mostly we played in the boats.
Did you go to the outer islands?
No, we just more or less stayed right in the cove. They call it Goose Cove. We stayed right in there, and there would be several skiffs down there, and each one of us would get a skiff and just pole or row or whatever we wanted to do.
Now, did y'all go swimming at what they call the sand spit?
Yeah, mostly. They had a bathing dock but it didn't last too long. But you could swim off the Sandsprat and not worry about anything. Of course, it wasn't no place to dive, but we didn't care. So.
Now, did you ever skip school and go play on the skiff?
No. No, I didn't do that.
That's good. That is good. Do you have anything?
Do you remember how many grocery stores were here then? And who owned them?
Well, Burton had one. I went with Mr. Walrath, and Mr. Day had one, and then they had the Swanee store. That's about 3 stores. That's about it.
It may have been before your time, and certainly before my time. There was a Goss, G-A-U-S-E. We called it Goss's Corner. That's where Tony's restaurant is now.
I don't remember that.
I think that they had a grocery store there, but I think it was before both of our times.
Well, it could be. The Swanee store, Days and Walters, about.
Yes, the Days was right across from City Hall.
Yeah.
Days store was. And the families lived upstairs, and the grocery store was downstairs. And that was true of several of the buildings. Their business would be downstairs, and their residence would be upstairs.
But there was me and my brother and my mother and father. Last I can remember, and Mr. Walters had a book, and you'd go buy your groceries. You didn't have to have no money. You just tell him what you want, and he'd write it down and give you that. And then at the end of the week, you'd go pay it up. And a lot of times, 4 of us, our bill wasn't more than $12 a week. So that's a big difference in what it is now. But we ate, well, I grant you, we ate a lot of fish and oysters, but not a whole lot. But we seemed to got along all right.
What is your favorite seafood?
I guess shrimp. Now, when I was in Orlando, I had a boat, and I rigged it up to catch shrimp. And we would go over to the coast, and at night, I had a light and a generator, and you anchor your boat when the tide's running a certain way, and the shrimp are running. And when they come up to the top, you could dip them up. And 5 gallons was the limit. But now, there's another way that they catch shrimp in Jacksonville. What's the river down there?
St. John.
And you go there with a cast net. And you don't have to wait for dark. You can go there in the daytime, and you cast that net. You find a good place, and you can catch shrimp. But I don't know, that just gets old. Mm-hmm. So, but.
I've heard people that have grown up here say that when they were children in Cedar Key, that they would leave the house in the morning and be outdoors playing with friends, going all over town, and not come home until supper time. And nobody ever worried about them. They had freedom of the town. They had many friends. Many people looked after other people's children if they were there. And did you have that same sort of situation?
Well, I didn't ramble around town. We had an area right up from the beach. It was at that time it was called the Grapevine, and we had our rubber guns. We'd make a gun, pistol, rifle, and we'd take an inner tube and cut it up, and that was our bullets. But we would go and play around those. There's a motel built there now, but at that time, Mama had a whistle, and she blew it one time for me and 2 times for my brother. And we'd hear that whistle, and we better get home. So,
It worked.
but it worked. It worked. Yeah. But I never was really one to ramble around town. It come nighttime, I would go in and wash up, get supper, and go to bed. But I slept upstairs. We had a big window that faced the Gulf, and there was always a breeze that come in that window, and I had a bed right inside that door, and I didn't have no trouble sleeping. But when I was fishing, my daddy would only call me one time, and I would go down there. Now, my mother, she was a great one for playing jokes, and people still remember some of the jokes that she would play on them. But she was known for that. But
What do you remember about the sponge boats that used to come in?
about the what?
Sponge boats.
Well, they would come in and dock, and if they had sponges they wanted to get rid of, they would hire somebody with a truck. But we'd go down there and we'd ask them for hardtack and olives, and they would give us all we wanted. So, but I'll tell you one thing about the Greeks that's not too good, but as I understand, when they get out there and dive for those sponge for a long time, they get so that when they walk, they kind of wobble a little bit. Well, at that time, there was a police department, people by the name of Booth, and he picked up 3 of the Greeks, and put them in jail and set it on fire. Now, that's been a long time ago, but it actually happened. But since that, there were no Greeks that came to Cedar Keys. They just stayed away from here. But it was a striving thing for them to pay somebody to take those sponge down to the tar pond. Mm-hmm. But I don't know whether you remember that or not, Johnny.
I remember the sponge boats coming in. I don't remember that incident that you just described. Mm-hmm. But I remember they coming in to dock here, and I remember going down, and they'd give us hardtack, like you say, and olives, you know. And when sometimes it'd be as many as 15, seems to me 15 or 20 of the boats would be anchored in the channel there between Cedar Key and Santiago, mm-hmm. when the weather was bad, and they'd come in to get away from the bad weather. And they would come in to buy supplies here in Cedar Key. And there were 2 Greek brothers that had a soda fountain and drugstore here. Remember Kipotes drugstore? Yeah. Right next to the Cedar Key Bank, or now the Drummond Bank.
What were the names of your brothers and sisters?
Okay. The oldest one is Myra, she married Doug Coburn, and they had 3 girls and 2 boys. You don't want their names?
Just go on with your siblings.
Okay. Then Etta was a school teacher for a long time, and she married, but she never came back to Cedar Keys much. But she'd come back and visit. But after a while, he died, and then she came back here to live. And Nina is still living. She's 96 years old. And then the boys were Ray, he was in Detroit, and Ed was in Tampa. And then Dougie, he was in Montgomery, and myself. I was the youngest. But
So only one stayed in Cedar Key and raised their family?
Myra, yeah. Mm-hmm. But her husband was a fisherman, so she didn't have much choice. But
Waylon's mother was my great aunt, Nina Delano.